Hello there, it's wonderful to be here at the Southern California Security Innovation Summit, remotely as it is. Of course, would have been excited to be there in person, seeing as it's a very close one to me, and I'm heavily involved with some of the different parties that are putting this together. But anyway, I wanted to just do a short talk. I'm going to do a presentation. It's really on something as basic as resume hacks. I've titled it Resume Hacks, Giving Yourself a Chance. And I think that's like an important thing to make sure that we're doing, right? Your resume ultimately is there to get you the interview. And so we'll talk about some tips and things that I would suggest on that. First of all, a little bit about me. Those that are local, we probably know each other already. Heavily involved in the local Los Angeles security community, cybersecurity community. I've been in tech recruitment for over 20 years. Co-founded Tyro Security back in 2012. It's a cybersecurity staffing and professional services firm. Wow, 2012. That's a long time ago now. And we were based in LA, headquartered in LA, and hence heavily involved in that local community. Also co-founded a business recently called Commute. Won't talk too much about that. It's on hold temporarily. Interesting times, especially interesting times to have a startup launched that is focused on helping to retain your staff and closely looking at how the commute factors into that. Wow, what a timing to do it, right? The one time that everybody's actually having this great work from home experiment. Anyway, is what it is. I think that's going to be something that's going to be huge over the next 12 months. I think it is actually going to be a big issue, probably bigger than before, with so many people realizing what it's like to be able to work from home or how it can be with a bit of flexibility. But anyway, something to be launched at a later date. Something we've launched actually during COVID and we've been working on for some time. The official launch hasn't come out yet, but website's just been finished. Something called the Next CISO program. Working on an apprenticeship program to bring more people into cybersecurity from underrepresented groups. 6-month program, doesn't cost anything. We fund it all. We've got some amazing partnerships that have enabled us to be able to give for free for people to come out of this apprenticeship with industry recognized certifications, with some commercial experience and ongoing mentorship as well. So that's something we're really excited about. If you're a company that are looking to partner up and looking to actually find some people that can maybe bring a bit more diversity for your team, give me a shout. We'd love to help. Again, it's like a no cost thing. So then most of you will probably know me from my involvement with the Cloud Security Alliance Los Angeles chapter. I've been involved now for almost the whole time I've been in LA. I think it was I went to maybe the second ever meeting when they were just looking to put the board together, and somehow volunteered for that. And I'm on my second stint as president and have been a board member ever since then. So always been something I've been really passionate about, volunteering and giving back. And I love the cybersecurity community. So that's enabled me to really hopefully make some impact, but certainly make a lot of friends. Other than that, also on the advisory board of the NSITE, which is it used to be called Cyberwatch West, but basically it's the National Cybersecurity Training and Education Center, and it's like a non-profit that helps state colleges, high schools actually as well, make sure that they're teaching the right kind of cybersecurity curriculum so that people actually come out with a level of education that's actually useful in the commercial world. So something that I work with. Personally about me, few people know this already, I am really passionate about sharks. I just popped a picture up there. That's a picture that I actually took. Yes, I was in a cage. Yes, it is a great white. I've also dived with tiger sharks, bull sharks, hammerheads, you name it, pretty much most of them. Only got a couple of the big ones to check off. Most of them without cages. And if anybody, that might sound scary to people that haven't actually done that, but for anybody that's actually into scuba diving and kind of understands the way that stuff works, not scary at all, absolutely an amazing thing to be into. If anybody out there, and I mention this in pretty much all my talks, if anybody out there is a keen scuba diver and also in cybersecurity, I personally would love to combine the two and maybe have some sort of security conference that is set up at a dive center or maybe a liverboard. Have to be a small one, I guess. But anyway, so anybody that's up for SecUberCon, I've already got the name ready for it, do let me know. So onto the talk itself. What is this actual talk about? So it's titled Resume Hacks, Giving Yourself a Chance, and it's focused on enabling you personally to write the best resume for yourself. Right, it's going to make sure that you're ensuring that you're going to miss all of those common mistakes. You're going to know what the common mistakes are, so you can be able to look out for those. And then finally, what most hiring managers want to read, and that just comes from 20 plus years of recruitment experience. You get a good feeling as to what a majority of hiring management are looking for when they're looking to look at your resume. So, what this talk is not about. Definitely not going to go through the roots of how outdated it is that we still use resumes. I know certainly at some of the higher levels, people are using kind of profiles instead. I know in a lot of cases, LinkedIn is actually being looked at as a potential of instead of a resume. But let's face it, at the moment, we're still using resumes. Nobody's kind of figured out, or nobody's got together and agreed one way of doing it that doesn't involve having this piece of paper or at least document that has a load of information on. So look, that's a talk for another time. Hopefully we'll get somewhere with that. And it's also not about something I call keyword tricks. I'm not a big believer that you really want to be responding to things like adverts. I don't think that they lead particularly well into getting the results what you want. And that might sound really strange because we advertise as a company. Because I don't believe in that, I kind of don't want to have a talk about how you can do keywords and how you can maybe manipulate the system to get sort of higher up the chat. That stuff for me, it doesn't work. So we're not going to talk about that. That's all the talking we've done about that now. Then the goals of this actual talk. So I think by the end of this talk, I want to make sure that you understand why resumes are still important, how to avoid those common mistakes that we talked about, and also like the relationship between your social media and your resume when it comes to your job search. And so, we're going to be coming up with some amazing tips, hopefully off the back of this, because you're going to have a great resume. So I'm going to finish it off with just a few tips at the end, and it's not part of the goals, but a few tips at the end as to what you can then do with your resume. So, resumes are still important, right? Why are they still important? A resume is your example or your ability to be able to show the hiring manager how you go about communicating in writing. If it's long, waffly, drawn out, not concise, that's how you're going to come across before you even get to an interview, which is why at some point you might not even be getting to an interview stage. That's probably frustrating and a frustration for a lot of people. They're not even getting a chance to get in there. And your resume is your document that shows how you will communicate in writing. So that's why it forms such a major part of the interview process. And that's why you want to make sure that you get it 100% correct. I actually think I put in that slide, it's a test. It is a test, right? Your test starts with your resume, which is why you've got to get it right. So this one, I've titled it, you are the secret ingredient. Your resume represents you and your career history, and so it's really important that you must write it, and you can take a look at other people's, you can take a look at templates, but you personally must write your resume. Just as we hope and expect that job descriptions are written by the actual hiring manager, not somebody else. That's some of the issues that we have on a different side of the business. But the resume is the same. You should write the resume. You should absolutely ask for a second set of eyes. Your friends that work in cybersecurity, ask them, what do they think? If you've got a great relationship with a recruiter, can you take a look at my resume and tell me what you think? Certainly, right? You'll find that a good recruiter will generally always try and make the time to look at a resume from somebody that hopefully they're going to get to place. And I talked about this. This is a delicate part, but I talked about this in my actual DEF CON talk earlier this year. I'm not a big believer in paying for somebody to write your resume. I know there are resume writing professionals out there. That's great. I will say I probably know of maybe one or two that actually are in the cybersecurity industry, so they are industry specific. But outside of that, they're all general, and you can't apply it. A resume for one industry shouldn't be the same as a resume for another industry. So my tips are based on what you should be doing for the cybersecurity industry. And the big thing I don't believe is you absolutely should not be paying somebody for this service. Save the money that you'd spend on that, and put it towards expanding your knowledge by doing training or certifications, or maybe buying a new tool that you can play with in your lab. But just don't spend it on a professional resume writer. Sorry professional resume writers out there, I apologize, but that's my personal opinion on it. So is what it is. Okay, so I titled this is a bit funny because I titled it Dress for the Occasion. What do you mean dress for the occasion? It's the equivalent of what you do with your resume, right? Your resume should fit the occasion that you're going to actually use it for. So I would split this into having two resumes, and I would have a generic resume, something that this generic resume is going to be what you then base your specific resumes off. So you come up with a generic resume. That's the kind of thing you take with you when you just go to conferences, and if somebody just says, have you got your resume, you kind of put that one across. I would recommend in all the cases where you're actually applying for jobs, that you actually have a specific resume you can use for that. So your generic resume is going to have a little bit less detail. It's definitely not going to be specific jobs. It's the one that you just have around. When somebody just says, can you send me your resume? That's the one you send. When you're actually applying for a job, then you're going to want to take that resume and you're going to want to look at the job description and take the relevant areas where you've maybe done projects, you've done specific things, you've used those tools, and you're going to want to make sure you talk about those projects in that resume. Your resume is a document that sells to that specific job description, and that's why it's really important that you have a specific resume. You want to go into a lot more detail of the relevant job experience in that specific one, a little bit less general. Always write it towards the job that you want to get. The generic one, I will say, should still be written so it's towards the kind of whatever you're passionate about in security, but the specific one written exactly to the job description. Right, so common mistakes. I promised you in the goals that we would go through common mistakes, and therefore you would have a good gauge as to the things that we typically see. Right, I am talking generically about resumes. So there are hiring managers that prefer longer, more detailed resumes, and there are others that don't. On the whole, a majority, and this is what you want to write your resume for, a majority are happy with a 2-page resume. Maybe a 3-page resume is still okay, depending on how many years you've been in the industry. If you're a new grad, 1 page is fine. If you've got experience, you should not be squeezing your resume down from 2 pages to 1 page. It'll look a mess, you've squashed too much, and you probably haven't got enough information in there. So I would say that once you've got a job or a couple of jobs under your belt in cybersecurity, you should have a 2-page resume. And also, if you're transitioning and you've got a previous career, maybe in IT or something else, you can go and have a 2-page resume. 3 pages is still fine. Once you get to 4, you're starting to push the boundaries of maybe being a bit too long. Quick ways that you can cut them out, we'll talk about in a little while. But certainly, keep your resume down 2 or 3 pages. That's what you want to be doing. Formatting errors is the next one I want to talk about. You want to be checking through your resume, making sure that you've got the same font throughout the whole of it. Checking the size of the font so that I understand in certain spaces where you might have a title or a subtitle, you might have that bolded, or you may have that in a different font size. It should still be exactly the same font. And the actual descriptions, every description should be the same size. So there's a really nice format. It looks really basic, but it sticks to it all the way around, all the way down. So just bear that in mind, and also think about the actual size of your, if you're trying to squash too much in, you're using a tiny font size, going to be really horrible to read. So bear those kind of things in mind. Spelling and grammar mistakes, oh my goodness. I mean, we've got, most nowadays you get a little red line, right? It tells you when you're spelling something wrong, or is it little blue one that's maybe the grammar mistakes. Either way, even if you're not great at it, and I personally, it's not one of my, you think being an English person, my English would be fabulous, it's not. It just sounds fabulous with the accent. The actual written stuff, first off, use the tools that you've got to make sure you're not putting spelling mistakes in there and grammar issues, and then just ask somebody else to read through it who you know is much better than that at you, right? Than you are. So do that. Missing specific employment dates. This comes up all the time. Like people put, right, I worked there since 2011 to 2012. Well, that could be 2 years or it could be 1 year, right? Put at least, not when I say specific dates, you don't have to actually put the day, but at least put the month and the year from and to. And if you have till present and actually you finished the job 2 months ago, change it to when you finished the job. And that's really important. Anything that brings up, what you're trying to do is when you read a resume, you're not trying to make sure that they're not spotting any problems or any issues, any doubts that you might have or they might have on your resume, because you don't want them thinking about, well, what does that mean, or what does this, you want them thinking, oh, that's good. No huge questions, right? The questions the questions you want are going to be when you get into an actual interview, and you want questions on your skills, on your experience, not questions around when did you start this job, when did you start that job. It's a waste of time. Employment gaps. Okay, this is a big one, and actually with everything that we're going through right now, it's going to be an even bigger issue probably coming up, or certainly going to be something that maybe quite a few people have found that they are going to have an employment gap on there. And this is my tip with it, right? Gaps happen. They happen for multiple reasons. And I think there's no harm in being very honest about that. If you've got a gap, you might even want to put what you were doing. If you were a homemaker, you were raising a child, or you were laid off and you took time off to travel, put where you traveled to. Yeah, you were laid off and you took time to build your knowledge in some other way. Great, fill that in. And actually that's quite a good tip for now. If you're sitting out there and you're out of work at the moment, think about how you're going to explain what you're doing right now to your next interviewer. And think about it. Have you got something that fills that gap? Oh, actually, do you know what? I was studying this and I was doing these bits of training and I passed all of these bits of training. And while I was doing that, I was obviously looking for my next opportunity. But have something that fits those gaps. And then the last thing I put was just irrelevant information. This document is made to be concise and accurate and relevant to the jobs that you're applying for. So just be really careful what you put in there. Examples of irrelevant information are things like CISSP, studying. People don't care whether you're studying or not. Tell them that in the interview. The number of times that I've actually seen people that have come across my desk 2 years later and they still have a certification in studying next to it. For 2 years they've been studying that certification, right? If you have stuff like that on there, the more irrelevant information you've got, the more likely you're going to get questions about areas that aren't necessarily relevant, right? Oh, so you're studying for your CISSP. How far have you got with that? When are you taking the test? All of a sudden you're having this conversation, and if it's something that's been sitting on your resume for 6 months or a year, it's wasting time when they could be getting to know you and not worrying about what you're putting on there. So just bear that sort of stuff in mind. The other thing I would say is that don't forget that once you get past whoever's first initially looking at your resume, and that person might be non-technical, you can have a mixture of technical people and non-technical people looking at your resume. And so it's really, really important that you write a resume that speaks to all of those people, just like you would when you were writing any kind of work, any kind of report. You might write that report for your manager, you might write it for, so also maybe developers can read what's come out of that, or maybe C-level execs will want to read that. And so sometimes you have to show your ability to write a document that fits into multiple different areas and can be read by people from a lot of different backgrounds. So just bear that in mind. Your resume is no different. So dishonesty, I love that. I love this little GIF that I put up there with Pinocchio, right? just don't lie. There is really no need to lie on your resume. You don't need to do that. Just don't do it, right? You will get caught out. And I've had people say, oh, well, you know, I've done it before and nobody, you know, eventually somebody will ask you a question and you'll get caught out. If you get caught out during the interview process, you've just wasted all your time because you're not going to be taken on. If you get caught out by them maybe doing a background check or something in that process, there's a high likelihood you're going to get the job pulled. You know, stupid things like upping your grades or changing your start and end dates. Those sort of things, like just bear that in mind. What you don't want to do is do all the hard work, get the job, and then find out that a tiny little lie creates a huge, like that seed of doubt grows and grows within a business. They don't want liars working in their business, right? So just don't be dishonest on there. Much better off being honest, accepting things, and learning how you can put a positive spin onto perhaps things that could be viewed as negative. Social media. Oh, okay. Look, I'm all about building a brand. If any of you follow me or are connected with me on LinkedIn, you probably see I'm posting questions and stuff like that. You cannot help, and you of course lock down all your social media. I have nobody from work on my personal social media. I probably wouldn't have social media if it wasn't for me living so many miles from home, and it's a good way for me to keep in contact with people back there and family members, and for them to keep the same. So all my stuff is pretty locked up. I do have a public persona as well. You know, I have a Twitter that really I process work stuff on, and I use LinkedIn really heavily. So these are the things I would say to you. We're in security already. If the stuff you're posting is private, it's not stuff you want to put out there in the public, keep it private, lock it down, don't accept people from work, you know, do it that way. If you're gonna want to publicize and you feel passionate about whatever you want to tweet or whatever you put out there, that's fine as well. But just understand that something that you tweeted about a way that you felt maybe 3 years ago that might not be relevant to how you feel now can stop you getting a job. You know, we look at politicians and famous people, and people go back through their tweets and look for stuff that they did wrong. There's no different from when people are hiring you. They're going to look and see if they can find your social media and see what that gives away about you. So it's really important that you do keep things private, or you just realize what you're doing by putting it out there in the public domain. And that kind of rolls me on to LinkedIn. LinkedIn should match up with your resume. If it doesn't, it creates a seed of doubt. We've talked about what seeds of doubt do, right? So make sure that your LinkedIn has the same companies as your resume, or you keep your LinkedIn very limited. You know, I've seen a lot of people, they limit what they share on LinkedIn. There's no job description. Some of them just have a job title. Some of them don't even have the companies that they're working for. Others do. You decide how much. I'm not going to give you advice on that. That's a personal thing, how you feel about that. But just realize that they should match what's on your resume, or at least be able to sort of cross match, right? If you haven't put the company down there, the dates should at least match and the job title should at least match. Anything else, seeds of doubt, especially when there are a lot of candidates perhaps going for a job, can lead to you just not getting an interview. And what we're trying to do is just give you that opportunity to get in front of the right people. So you've now got an amazing resume, hopefully, and you're now at a point where you want to get it out and you want to make sure it's in front of people. And this is one of the reasons why I said, like, steer clear of the whole keywords thing. Avoid adverts as much as you can. It's a last resort, right? You know what happens. Your resume goes to an advert, it gets in a big pile, probably isn't looked at by somebody like the hiring manager because there's so many responses, and we get a lot of junk responses even in an area where there is very high demand. I can't tell you how many security guard resumes that I get for replying back to cybersecurity jobs, and I know that that's something that some of the CISOs and hiring managers that I talk to have the same issue with. Think about things you can do positively, maximize your network, think about people you know. Who do you know personally, friends and family? Do any of them, what companies do they work for? they might not work in cybersecurity, but they might work for a big company that has a cybersecurity department. Can they be your foot in the door? Think about your virtual network. So everything that you're doing on LinkedIn, who you're connected to, how can they help you? Also the local community. This particular conference has been put together in conjunction with a lot of the local community. Being involved with the local community gives you access to so many different people. It's such a great way to perhaps get your foot in the door with some companies, or give you opportunities that might never actually get publicly put out there. So do bear that in mind. Conferences, if there are any companies you really want to work for and somebody's speaking from that company, if you're there in person, it's a great opportunity to actually get there and connect with them. If not, you can at least connect with them maybe on LinkedIn. I saw you talk here, I loved your talk. Get a conversation going, and then mention, look, I've seen that there's a job advertised. Is there any way that I could send my resume to you and you could put them in front of the right people? Likewise, the attendees at conferences as well. Where they work, there might be cybersecurity opportunities there. And just when you're thinking about this, a lot of companies offer very, very high referral amounts. I've mentioned it in a few of my talks before, but actually somebody I know that we placed then went into the company and actually referred 3 more people that took those jobs. Of course, we would have loved them to refer them to us, but they referred them internally to the company first. All 3 of those people got a job. That company was paying $5,000 per recommendation, $15,000. That's a hell of a lot of money. So it is in the interest sometimes of the people that work there to actually have people that they can refer. And often you actually jump the process when that happens. If you're a hiring manager and you get referred somebody through somebody in your team, you're probably much more likely to at least have a conversation with them, even if they don't look 100%, just because you don't want to upset your team member who's referred them, right? So it's a great way into a business. And then I always talk about your personal brand, and I think it's important you can maximize your use of LinkedIn to actually ensure that you have a brand and that people know you and they see your name. The way you can even gain a little bit more credibility than just talking a good game is actually to go out and speak yourself at conferences, do research, and then present that research that you've done and put it out there in the public domain, so you get known not only for just being a face and a speaker, but also perhaps somebody that's doing something that's cutting edge or doing something that's interesting. So do bear that in mind. It's good to have a personal brand. You don't have to go all out to make yourself this huge public persona. And I know in security, a lot of people wouldn't feel comfortable necessarily doing that, but you can at least put together presentations that are of interest to other people. And that's a great way to gain credibility and speak at all of these different conferences. And then the last way, of course, I'm going to say this, build a relationship with specialist recruiters. We have a good gauge of what's going on in the marketplace. We can give you a lot of advice. And we also realize that if I do a good job and perhaps you get your job through finding it yourself or through a connection and not through whatever opportunities we find you, you may still, or hopefully you still respect us for what we've done and you appreciate that. And at some point, either you become a hiring manager or you're doing a great job internally and they're struggling to fill a role. You turn around and say, hey, you should speak to Kris at Tyro Security. They're an amazing recruitment company. If I was going to spend money on a recruitment company, I would talk to them. So build yourself a relationship with a specialist recruiter. It's good for us. It's good for you. That's my recommendations on that. Probably very biased, but it is what it is. And then last of all, just the takeaways. Hopefully at the end of this, you kind of have a good understanding of why resumes are still so important. It is truly a test and a document that is going to get your foot in the door. And I know it's frustrating when you don't even get a chance to interview. So that's why it's important to make sure your resume is spot on. Then you know what the common mistakes are that we see. Hopefully this means you can avoid those. Doesn't take a lot of work to actually make sure that you do. And yet still probably 90% of our resumes have one of those common mistakes in, or several of them usually. If they've got them once, they've usually got them right the way throughout. And then lastly, how important the social media is and how that fits into what you do, whether that's important because you should have it locked down, or whether that's important because you should have this public persona that matches what you're doing out there. So that they're all important things. And again, don't, like, if you're going to give your money to anybody, don't give it to a resume writer. Tell you what, come to me, tell me, say, Kris, this is how much money I'm going to pay a resume writer. I will give you some advice. I'm probably going to get inundated and I won't be able to do this now, but I will give you the advice, and I'll take your money off you and I'll give it to a charity, a non-profit, probably something to do with sharks, I don't know. But don't pay for it, right? Do not pay for a resume writer. It's rarely, if ever, do you actually need that. So look, that is the end of my talk. It's a quick one. I might have gone over a little bit, but anyway, I really, really appreciate you listening to me. I've left my contact details up there. I am on Twitter. You're best connecting with me on LinkedIn. That's where you're going to probably find me most active and responsive on there. Thank you so much. I've really enjoyed doing this. So take care. If you've got any questions, you know how to contact me. Thank you.